Hello and welcome to our America's Job Exchange presentation of Compliant Outreach with ROI, Vocational Rehabilitation Services delivers. Before we get to the main event, I'd like to point out a few things. This presentation is not meant to be a legal presentation. Should you have legal questions, please consult the advice of your counsel. If you do have questions during our presentation that are not of a legal nature, please feel free to submit them via the chat box. We will answer as many questions as we can at the end of our event. If we don't get your question today, you will receive an answer via email. Please note, because some people have asked in the past, we will be sending a copy of this presentation and a link to the recording to you after the broadcast. Lastly, after this event, a short survey will pop up. Please tell us what you thought of today's presentation, what you'd like to hear about in upcoming events. Your input helps us shape our programming, so please do let us know. And now let's move on to our fantastic speakers for today. I'm pleased to introduce Joan Phillips, the Assistant Commissioner of the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission. In her role, Joan provides program vision, leadership, and strategic direction for the Vocational Rehabilitation Division. Also joining us is Bill Allen, the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission Director of Job Placement Services. Bill is responsible for employer development and engagement statewide for the 24 field offices of MRC. And joining us from the Boston District Office of the Department of Labor, Office for Federal Contract Compliance Programs, is Rhonda Aubin-Smith. Rhonda began her career with OFCCP in 2000 and took on her current role as District Director in 2011. Finally, we have Paul McGovern with us today, who will be moderating our discussion. Paul is the founder of Practice Consulting, an HR consulting firm. Welcome to all of our panelists. And Paul, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Lauren. We're pleased to be here. So obviously today our focus is on individuals with disabilities, but it's not the disability side that we're focused on. It's the labor side. It's the work side. This is always important, but it's critical today for businesses given the tight labor market that we are in and have been in for some time. OFCCP Director Lean talks frequently about bringing IWD, disabled, into the workforce and quotes many, many times how many unfilled jobs there are across the country, almost 7.5 million. That number is very stable for quite some time. There's a lot of jobs out there. There's a lot of capacity that needs to be filled. Any recruiter on this call knows what it is like right now to try and source talent. It's very tough because the market is so saturated. The numbers show us that there is a place to go for finding requisitely skilled talent, and that is in the disability community. Right now, disability rate of unemployment is about twice that of those without disability. There's a lot of untapped capacity there. When you look at the U.S. employment participation rate, those with a disability, about 20% are in the workforce, as opposed to almost 70% of those not disabled. That 20%, experts tell us, is a very low number. We can push that number. There are people who can do needed work out there who are hidden in that number, if you will. So there's untapped capacity. Is there a barrier to entry to get those people into jobs? Perhaps. But as we're going to talk to today, Voc Rehab resources such as those in Massachusetts are a great way of getting that capacity into the workplace. Our focus is going to be on the labor market, on individual disabilities as a resource in this tight labor market, and how this plays into affirmative action. The whole idea of affirmative action is non-discrimination and equal access. So Voc Rehab has a big place to play in that equal access for individuals with disabilities. So, Joan, would you just give us an overview, if you would, about the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission?
Certainly. The Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission assists individuals with disabilities to live and work independently in the community. We have multiple programs that complement each other, including a community living program, a disability determination program that assists individuals with Social Security, disability income eligibility, and the Vocational Rehabilitation Program, which we're focusing on today, that assists individuals with disabilities to prepare for, obtain, and maintain competitive integrated employment. Our services include education and training, career counseling and guidance, job placement, assistive technology, post-placement supports, and a range of other services. We are a valuable resource of untapped talent for employers.
Thank you. If we could shift to the next slide, Lauren, I think this goes to some of the work that you've been doing lately at the MRC, Joan.
Sure. I think what sets the Massachusetts Vocational Rehabilitation Division apart from other VR divisions across the country is that we are very much focused on the dual customer, the employer, and the individual with disability who is preparing, some ready, willing, and able to go to work at the moment. We excel in our work because we are not afraid of innovation, and our innovative practices have led to various levels of recognition, including White House Champion of Change for our public-private partnership with Spalding Rehabilitation Network, City of Boston MRC Day, trained recognition for summer internship training for our consumers, who many of whom end up becoming employed as a result of participating in those internships, and recognition from the Associated Industries of Massachusetts with the Gould Award that was given to us by the governor of Massachusetts for our job-driven training initiative with CVS Health, where we prepare individuals for employment as pharmacy technician. The result of that particular job-driven training is that over 80% of the consumers who complete that training end up going to work for CVS. It has served as a model for several other job-driven trainings which we have developed with employers across the state.
Thank you. Now, as we go through this presentation, I think we'll be talking about the specific higher events that the MRC, Mass Rehab Commission, puts on. But every state does have its rehabilitation agency. And in the deck that we prepared, there is a link to that, so that when those on the call get the deck after the call, there is a link so you can find your state agency if you don't happen to be in Massachusetts. So there are other resources in other states. We will be focusing on Massachusetts programs here, especially as they've come to the attention of OFCCP. That's part of what this call is about. So, Rhonda, could you tell us a little bit about how the work of the vocational rehabilitation service agencies, such as the Massachusetts agency, aligns with the work that you do with OFCCP?
Yes, as everybody can note on the slide, we actually list the citation of our regulatory requirements for government contractors to recruit, do the outreach and recruitment for individuals with disabilities. And one of the examples that OFCCP provides for contractors to use in their outreach are the state vocational rehabilitation service agencies. So it can be very successful. And Joan mentioned that the MRC is a little different from others, mainly because it's a duality of the employer as well as the consumer. And I can tell you, having worked with MRC for many years, is that they definitely will work with contractors, with companies. a little history is we have worked with MRC for many years, and it started out early on as connecting our contractors with MRC when there was a need for them to do the outreach, if we noticed it in a review, if any of you were familiar with our reviews. However, there was a day, it was in 2012, MRC staff, including Joan and Bill and myself and some of my staff, were sitting at a table brainstorming, trying to figure out how can we make the partnership with MRC and OFCCP more effective. It just didn't do what we wanted it to do, and we sat there and brainstormed and came up with some ideas, and that's how we actually came up with the hire event that was held in 2013. And we just, I'll tell you, it just took a group of people coming together and throwing something on the table, and it morphed into the hire event that you're going to hear about.
Great, thank you. One thing I'd like to underline at this point is I know there's a lot of affirmative action practitioners on the line today listening in, and we have the requirement, and we have the reg up on the screen that talks about the outreach requirement. To your point, the Vocational Rehabilitation Services are the first on the list of those proposed means of outreach that the OFCCP had put embedded in the regulation to help contractors. The contractors obviously have an outreach requirement under the regulation, good faith outreach, but it's always been a problem, and I had this problem as a practitioner. Okay, I'm going to do outreach specific to my affirmative action profile, my goals. How do I know that what I, talk my company into doing is going to have a result? Sometimes it just seemed to be, throwing things out there and seeing what you could reel in. The program that we're going to talk about today is so much more focused that it is a way to find skilled people, and I think that's what sets it apart and makes it unique. So I just wanted to underscore both the obligation that the contractor has, that working with programs such as we're talking about today is important to show good faith and to, frankly, help the practitioner survive the audit when that comes down the road. And is useful for the company because it's a way to actually find somebody who's going to be able to do the job. So it meets a lot of different requirements and makes it, I think, quite exciting. So it's a good story about sitting around and getting the hire event going. So what does the hire event actually look like? Bill, could you fill us in a bit on this?
Sure. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be on this call with my colleagues and Assistant Commissioner Phillips, who is really the catalyst for innovation here at the MRC. And working with Rhonda and her staff, Lauren Banowski, has been nothing but an incredible performance of outcomes that are allowing qualified people to go to work. So what we do and how we do it is providing our MRC candidates for employment. By the time we hit the hiring event where people are being interviewed, I don't consider them clients anymore. I consider them professional candidates for employment. And we really dissect the opportunities that federal contractors, employers are putting forth. During its infancy stage, our first event was held actually at the OFCC Boston event, and it went over extremely well, and we knew that this was a foundational practice, a best practice that we had to carry forward for the ensuing years, which I think this was our 7th year, if I'm not mistaken. So what we really do is get at the foundational practice of identifying who really has an interest in going to work, and where does that individual have the skills and the abilities and their interests and their strengths, and what skills are suitable with an employer seeking to hire the most qualified individual with openings that are current and forecasted for the future. One of the taglines that we have with a lot of our federal contractors is call us first. Oftentimes, before they even post a job, they call us first, and we pretty much have a candidate in line after understanding the match and the suitability of the skill set with the cultural environmental background. So this is now an annual conference or a hiring event, which occurs every year in the spring, and it usually takes us about 6 months to really prepare. And I think we're going to get into that at some point during this call.
6 months is a long time to prepare, so it's not a one and done, obviously. Rhonda, I'm very interested in that the OFCCP is identifying federal contractors as possible participants in the program. So this is very proactive on Boston OFCCP's part. Can you tell us a little bit about how this is happening, how you're working that piece of the puzzle?
Absolutely. It originally started out, and Bill had mentioned Lauren Barnarski, who has been our compliance officer, who has really driven this program. In the first year, we reached out to contractors that we had identified needed assistance in finding individuals with disabilities and recruiting under the Section 503. And so we sent out invites, voluntary invites to contractors. I think we had for 3 years at that time, inviting them to take part. And I think the first year we had close, if not over 40 contractors who had offered to come, had offered to actually provide the openings to MRC. So each year we would build on companies that we had been introduced to, have known, invites to the ones who have come in the past years. We've actually even had contractors contact us and say, we hear about this event, can we take part? So it started out with those that we were familiar with, and then companies coming to us that we may have never reviewed, but we know they're government contractors. So it's been, inviting them, voluntary again. It's not something that we have forced upon contractors. And we have had a great participation, and contractors just asking to join each year.
Thank you. As a affirmative action practitioner, I would be looking at this saying, if I document those contacts that I have with the MRC, with OFCCP about this process, if it's taking 6 months, I'm putting this into my affirmative action planning year and rolling this through, keeping documentation about it. On audit, that would be something that I would be very interested in providing to the OFCCP to say, my company is taking its obligation seriously. So there's that side. I think there's a very practical side of a program like this for the practitioner. It's embedded in the regulation. It's a resource that is available, and agencies are helping contractors both find skilled personnel and meet those regulatory requirements. So it's a win-win from my book. And I'm very glad it's been going on since 2013. I would say that it has legs at this point. So, and I think there's some catch up on this. We'll pick up later on about championing this type of program for the country as a whole. But it's certainly been a very interesting start with Massachusetts. So if we could move along, I think, to the next slide. Bill, we all know what a job fair is. You show up, you have your resume, you're there, you're not there. Can you reinforce again how this hire event is not a job fair? You were saying, for example, earlier on that it takes 6 months of preparation. That's a long time. That's a big commitment. How would you say that this thing is differentiating itself from the job fair that practitioners know about, and why are you putting all this effort into it? Why is it necessary to dig down this deep?
So thank you, Paul. That's a perfect lead into our discussion, that it is not a job fair. And we, in the beginning, struggled with telling our staff that this is not a job fair. People are actually applying online, and we're doing our evidence-based practices, which I'll describe in a minute. But we are coming together for people to apply for open positions that are active with some organizations that are saying, hey, we have these open positions. We don't know where we can find these skills, and we're wondering how these individuals will be moved forward. So behind the scenes, the 6 months is for our team working closely with Lauren and her staff, identifying employers that have open job orders and have a current need, and preparing those individuals for forecasted open position as well. So what we see when we look at open positions like you see Raytheon, Marriott, Enterprise, and there's dozens and dozens of other employers that are federal contractors and not listed up there, we really work closely with our counseling staff and our job placement specialists. We have a team of job placement specialists and employment services specialists to ensure that we identify openings, understand where we're going, where these individuals may need some training, and really preparing them for the company culture as we dissect the job descriptions and actually meet with some of the contractors and do company tours and industry briefings to really bring that information back with our team of counselors and employment staff to prepare these individuals to move forward. Some of these individuals actually are hired before the hiring event itself, and that is something that is complementary to the contractors that see the skill set beyond the disability and they move them forward before we have an actual formal hiring event. And we're tracking those numbers as we grow this hiring event, and it's more beneficial to the employers to capture the skills. Counselors prepare these clients for employers day one. The individual employment plans are reflecting what the business market is asking for, and in particular, what are the expectation and requisite skills that are required to do the job, the task, the essential functions. We really have a really cutting-edge hard and soft skills training. We have a job-driven training program that customizes to the specific needs of the employer, where we spend either a couple of days or 8 weeks preparing individuals for the specific needs of that employer, and we blend that in as we move forward with the hiring event. Behind the scenes, we have our practices which is evidence of moving people forward to our best practices, mock interviewing to the level and skills required of the individualized employer. And they actually apply online a week or two before the event, and they're prepared to go into an interview the day of the event.
The New England ILG, so that the local ILG here, has worked with MRC on the mock interviews. I've done some of those myself. Very interesting process where I took the role of the company representative that the MRC client would have the interview with down the line, and we went through the mechanics of an interview. So I think by the time your client has gone to the job fair itself, they've actually already interviewed for the job, which I thought was an excellent way of breaking some ice there. If there's a barrier to entry, one of it might be, how do I present myself during an interview? And I think that sort of advanced peek at it would be helpful. Do you find that really improves the success rate for your candidates by having this mock interview?
So that's part of our evidence-based practices that we track, and when we don't mock interview someone, they typically struggle moving forward, and it takes many more interviews for them to finally secure competitive integrated employment. And my boss, Joan Phillips, is on the call. We'll take a look at some of the figures that we're working with, and we'll say, Bill, the practices have not been implemented. You can clearly see that when we do our mock interviews. Absolutely, Paul. And thank you for doing your due diligence with our mock interviews, because it really is a practice that is proof of concept that it works, that the time spent in each individual, I have a requirement of a minimum of 3 mock interviews customized to meet the employer expectations. And if they get through that, then we have a high percentage return on that investment of mock interviewing and many other things behind the scenes to build up that skill level.
Well, that's really interesting, because I opened up with the idea of what's the barrier to entry. We have, such low penetration, 20% market penetration of individuals with disabilities in the workplace. It sounds as if the interview process itself is a barrier to entry for some individual with disabilities who, when properly, instructed how to get through this, minefield. An interview is a minefield for anybody. The success goes way up. So that's a cool way of turning these numbers on their heads.
Exactly, and it's with the help of the employer and really defining and really analyzing those job descriptions and really having a Q&A with each employer representative and really getting down in the trenches with the individual employer so that we get to know what they're seeking. We build upon the skills gap that is ever present in the current labor market, and we customize our training programs with the help of each employer that we work with. And it seems to have picked up some speed with really a great return for employers. So we want to be of service to both the people. Joe mentioned the dual customer approach. So we're here to be of service to both our consumers who we turn into professional candidates for employment, and then we want to make sure our employers are satisfied.
Do you think this
Joan, I just want to jump in for a second to, just underscore the reason why we've achieved such great success with this hiring event is that we spend a lot of time preparing our consumers, and we ensure that they're a good fit for the employer, not just in terms of the skill sets, which is hugely important, but also we put effort into understanding the business, the culture of the business, and ensure that the individuals who come for interviews the day of the hiring event are a good fit for that employer. I think another great benefit of this hiring event to our consumers is that, once people have interviewed, they have opportunities to network with all the employers who are at the event. And sometimes, people get interviews on the spot with an employer for whom they had not applied online, but because of that opportunity to network, they get an interview, and some of them actually get jobs with those employers.
And this is Rhonda. I would like to, if possible, to piggyback on what Joan has just talked about with the consumers going around networking and getting the impromptu interviews and possible hires. The one thing myself and my staff have noticed is the excitement of these consumers when they come to these events and they do go around and talk to other companies. And it's nice to see that they actually do get hired from somebody other than who they may have been interviewing with. And along with that, the excitement of my staff, because it's one day of the year that my entire staff will go and assist at these hire events. And the first year, their excitement showed every time somebody was hired, because early on it was like being in a bar and a bartender getting a $10 tip. When there was a hire, there would be a bell that rang. And every time that bell rang in the early years, it would pump MRC staff, it would pump OFCCP staff, and then the consumers were getting excited. So this is a very, very successful partnership and event that we have had, so much so that it has now moved over into the western part of Massachusetts, where our my sister office in Hartford, the Hartford district office, has actually taken on having these events. But there's a lot of excitement, and you'll hear stories on the friendly competition between the contractors who are in the same line of work. It's really helpful, and again comes back to helping the requirements of the government contractor.
So can I just share? I think this is appropriate to share at this stage. We came to this last hiring event. We had a formal interview lined up, and as Joan and Rhonda mentioned, we have what we call impromptu interviews. People are networking. Well, the impromptu interview that occurred before the formal interview was one major hospital in Boston was interviewing this individual, and they were going to a second interview, the formal interview, and before they got to the formal interview, they were offered a job at the impromptu interview, and they accepted it, so we had to cancel the formal interview.
And those are those bell-ringing moments.
Well, I think one of the things that's coming out of here is that this is a process, not just a day. 6 months to prepare clients and to do that alignment of the employer, the federal contractor, with the skill set of the MRC client. Time to develop that skill set of the MRC client so it really matches what the employer is looking for. That time in. But the hire event, it sounds like a day, there's a month's worth of preparation here. It sounds like the hires are occurring in a day. And what I'm hearing is that this is a network process, that the network is already set before you show up for the hire event, and that there's activity going on which results in hires before. There's results in cross-pollination between companies during the hire event, people coming in. Maybe they're going to be looking for one job, but they actually get job offered in another. Practitioners, watch out for your ATS for tracking this stuff, how they came in, all that stuff, your business there. Keep track of that. And activity after the event itself. So really this whole process going on. Another point, I think there's some companies that we have up on this slide. Some of these companies are very well known, Raytheon, Enterprise Rent-A-Car. I'm not sure if everybody through the country is going to know Dobble or Elliott. So can you tell us about the profiles of the companies themselves who were involved in this program? Are they all gigantic? Are they mom-and-pop shops?
And this is Rhonda. I'll answer that. It is a large range. You have some of the very smaller companies that may have somewhere between 50 and 150 employees, all the way up through our major, massive hospitals here in Boston that have 26,000 employees. So it's a wide range, and a wide range of what they do for work. You have hospitals, you have educational entities, you have production, you have, as you see, enterprise. It covers a plethora of areas and sizes, and nobody will be turned away. If you're interested in taking part in one of the hire events, you just need to notify us, and pretty much notify us, I would say, this fall, and not wait until the spring, because as everybody has said, it takes a good 6 months to get this ball rolling and to get the consumers lined up with the companies that have agreed to come.
And our focus in this discussion has really been on the ability of people to enter into the work group as opposed to disability, but to focus on what it takes to get over that barrier to entry to get into the workforce. In talking to the companies, is there any surprise on their part in terms of what I'm hoping is the simplicity or the ease of incorporating MRC clients into their work groups?
Yeah. So do you want me to answer that?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things that we look at when, to your point, Paul, you stated it really perfectly, when we're preparing our individuals and we're networking behind the scenes and seeing outcomes happen before the event, during the event, and post-event. I think the post-event is where the real rubber meets the road, where employers start networking with each other. The feedback that we've gotten from employers, this is not a formal survey, but feedback on the individual consumer or candidate for employment, is that maybe not a good fit for my organization, but it would be a good fit for my other organization that I do business with. So they're networking and moving individuals along the way. So it's a very productive day. 80% of the candidates that are coming to this event are moving forward into competitive integrated employment. So it's a huge win for employers, and it's a perfect time for them to really see that they're capturing some qualified individuals, and it's better than a job fair, because there's realized outcomes the day of the event. I'm not sure if I answered your question specifically.
I think you did. And I got one more. I think the soft skills training. What do you consider that to be?
So that training actually was developed and improved along the way by our vocational rehabilitation counselors, and we've had some employers take a look at some of the soft skills that are embedded in everyday practice of going to work. So those skills are really customized for the employer, but the foundational skills of showing up on time, how to really prepare yourself for the world of work. What are the issues that you may encounter on work, and how do you deal with them? What are the critical thinking skills that are required on the job? And what problem-solving skills would you implement in a particular situation while at work? It's like a 4-week training program that we have internal to MRC. Joan, I don't know if you want to comment on that any further.
You know, I mean, one of the things that we hear employers say, and probably for more entry-level jobs, is that we can train for hard skills. We're looking for people who can come in with the soft skills to get started and to, you know, really keep the job and grow within the job.
Yeah. There's an awful lot to know to survive in a company, really, how to get along with your peers, how to take instruction, all of those pieces. Mm-hmm. Not all of them came easily to me. So,
yeah. And the other value added to that, which we didn't really talk about, but once we do the placement and the person is hired at the hiring event or wherever, we're part of that team. So the employer gets to call us to really debrief on how well the job is going. If there's specific issues or other barriers that present themselves, we have a team of experts that come in that can provide support to ensure success on the job.
Okay, I got to ask.
For the most part, those supports are behind the scene if needed. And, you know, we're excited that a significant number of people end up going to work as a result of this one-day event. You know, in the beginning, we had some employers who came, and I think they were there to observe. We don't have an issue with that. We hope that people come to hire, but I think they leave, you know, feeling inspired and hopeful. We've had in the past employers tell their stories. Employers get to network with each other, you know. I mean, we have some champions who show up every year, like CVS Health. We had one year where CVS Health and the Home Depot were competing. For people, it's fantastic. I think the bell was ringing a lot that year because, you know, we had a lot of hires among those two companies. We acknowledge employers who hire for the first time. We acknowledge employers who hire at high skill levels. I think sometimes because, you know, this is mass rehab and we serve individuals with disabilities, the assumption might be that, you know, these individuals, you know, are here for entry-level opportunities, but we have all skill levels at mass rehab. Our services allow for us to assist individuals to get our internal job-driven trainings, which are short-term job-driven trainings based on employer input, employer curriculum, and we also help people to go to college and get degrees. So, you know, we have accountants, engineers, we have people who are looking for cashier jobs in retail. So the range is very wide. And just like the general population, individuals with disabilities have interests across the board, and we are here to help them, you know, to hone those interests and to build the skills and, you know, really prepare for the jobs that currently exist in the economy.
Let me ask a silly question, Joan, but there's a point to it. And we've talked a lot about how much work goes into preparing for the end, how much work it takes to prepare the client. So what is the actual dollar cost to the employer for this service?
It is zero.
All right.
No cost.
No cost. Good. Rhonda, you talked about ringing a bell earlier on. That was sort of cool. So people enjoy being there. What's the ambiance, better word for it, of this event?
Well, I would say even from the beginning, as I had said earlier, is that there's always a camaraderie between the contractors that are there. staff, whether it be MRC staff or OFCCP staff, are pumped. They're excited to do this because they see the results on any given day that we're there. It is really friendly. And something I didn't mention before is that since OFCCP is there, we're also there to answer any questions that a contractor might have outside of the hire event. So it's really a very informative and helpful and friendly and exciting day. And I guess we all just get wrapped up into the excitement because you will see the consumers who will come out and once they've had an offer. And then the companies walk away happy because they're getting qualified staff members. And it's a success. And that's why it's a hire event and not the job fair that has been thrown around before. But it's really a very positive day all around. Even when the weather's out bad, and we've had some days that the weather's been horrible, once you get in there, it's just a very positive day overall.
Well, let's look at the actual results here. On the next, yes, all right. So we talked about this a bit, and Rhonda, of what's your takeaway from these results?
Well, as you can see, that's for the first few years. We don't have 2019, but when you look at the number of consumers that come and the number of hires, it's amazing. And the one thing I want to bring everybody's attention to is the range in hourly wages. That's going to change because our minimum wage in the state is going up. So that low end will change, and hopefully the other end will go up higher. And as Joan said, there's consumers with a wide range of skills. So you can have entry-level to scientists that are making this money. And the other thing I want to note is that, and I had mentioned it before, is the return participation of our contractors is high. It's high. We do have a good core group that come back every year, and then there's some that have been there the 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, and then we're always having those that come for the first time. Other than that, I think Bill can speak to the actual numbers, the figures that come from MRC.
Yeah, sure. The numbers are kind of representative of what we encounter and experience. As the slide indicates, we have lawyers, senior copywriters, software engineers. They're all making over $100K a year. These are skill set that were embedded within these individuals, and we just wanted to make sure what organization and what would be the fit. I think Joan mentioned talking about the match, the fit, and that's when you come up to these high skill levels, it now becomes what is the best environmental fit for the organization and the individual. And that happens, I got to say this, well beyond compliance. We at this stage, we are beyond compliance for what OFCCP is charged to do. We are now building strong and powerful relationships for future individuals with the skills and for future employers that want the requisite skill set to come through the door. And oftentimes I'll hear an employer at the end of an event come up to me and say, Bill, can you send me 3 more of these individuals because this is who we need and we want to capture more of these skill set because it's a perfect fit. So beyond the money and beyond compliance, it's a good fit. In the like Ron just said, the average wage is going to be reflective of a higher dollar per hour amount because our minimum wage is going up. So I think it's right. $14.51 per hour is what we have for an average wage, and then that $9 one that you see there that's a point in time report, and even the numbers that you see for successful employment outcomes, 90 plus days, we're still tracking that. So that $4.16 that was done in 2018, that's gone up relatively speaking to the point in time report that's being done by Mass Rehab R&D. So what I really keen in on is the fact that 97% of the job seekers, they are hugely satisfied with the outcomes that they have. And from my perspective, go ahead.
And I just wanted to add, based on the client job seeker satisfaction, what we don't see there straight out is the company satisfaction, but it's actually shows in their willingness to come back year after year. So they're happy with what work they've done and the outcomes of MRC. So they do return every year, and to me that speaks volumes on how happy they are with the type of event that we are partnering in and providing the skilled consumers for them.
So here's another anecdotal account. Here's another anecdotal account. One of the contractors on the slide you saw, I believe it was Elliott Human Services. It may not be that company, but an individual 4 years ago was hired at the event by this company and returned as a hiring manager this year to hire more individuals that were qualified to go to work. So we're building generations of hires from people that came to the event as a job seeker, was hired, and now has come back as a contractor, as a hiring authority to hire individuals that are qualified. So those are the aha moments that you have, people coming up to you, employers coming up to you and saying, how do they want to do more of these hiring events, and we don't have the ability to deliver. They want to do these 2 or 3 times a year because they're getting quality people.
That's great. That's a great story. Thank you for adding that one in. Well, let's go back.
This is Joan. I know we have here average hours worked 28.3. Just want to emphasize that we do have many individuals who want to work and do work full time, and others who choose to work part time. It's exciting to think that a one-day event results in, I think the highest number of hires we've had in 1 year was about 120. I'm not sure what other event or where else you would go and 120 people get jobs as a result of an event, a one-day event.
Very good. Well, thank you. Let's look at how we play this back into the affirmative action frame. Lauren, if you go to the next slide. And Rhonda, what do we put OFCCP back on? You've been to the hire event. What is the contractor doing with this data? In addition,
the one thing,
good, perfectly suited fill, a new employee who's knocking it out of the park. In terms of affirmative action planning, what's going on here?
Well, that's definitely an item that contractors want to start tracking in their outreach and even their hiring as part of our requirements. You working with the vocational rehabilitation services will assist a contractor in meeting those regulatory requirements. But you ask yourself, is your company actually participating with Voc Rehabs? Are you working with them? If you are you documenting what you do? Are you documenting the steps that you're taking with the MRC? Are you documenting what happens at a hire event or the other other options that MRC has? Are you reviewing this? Because they should be taking this information back, and with the hires, is you analyze the data. You analyze how many individuals were applied for a particular job, and these individuals will be included, those that you interview during a hire event. And then the outcomes of how many were individuals with disabilities, how many of the positions that were filled with individuals with disabilities. And then you bring that into the review, the audit and reporting that is required in the affirmative action plan, and you can show your success. Or companies see they need to do a little bit more work on that end, they can do that. But working with a Voc Rehab can actually help you. It's one of the examples we provide, and we can show in Massachusetts that it can be successful working through the process with MRC and OFCCP on these hire events. And as MRC will show, they have other options. But you take that data back, put it into your tracker, or however you're tracking your outreach and with the programs, and then you just review it and analyze it and write up your assessment for your affirmative action plan, as well as documenting the numbers that are required.
Right. Good, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to focus on the effectiveness side of this. I've been involved in companies putting together their media spend programs for a year and including diversity in that, making sure that they have resources that they're going to push job postings out to, which are niche boards, niche resources, work groups focusing on particular communities where we have, the plans have shortfalls, all of that goodly stuff. You push the stuff out and you cross your fingers and you hope. The numbers coming back, to me, as not a media expert, didn't look that hot, but the media people were jumping up and down about very low rates of return. That was really good. That's, that you get. It's tough. Most of this stuff is, you throw the bread in the water and nothing comes back. If you get some, that's great. The return on higher, per number of people put into these programs, Joan, I think we were talking about 80% higher. These rates are very high. So for me as a practitioner, getting involved in a program like this, showing that I've been, showing up through the year, taking it seriously, going to the higher event, finding people that I need to begin with, and then saying to the OFCCP on audit, yeah, we did something and it worked. It was effective. The contractor has a duty to look, as Rhonda said, at what working and not working. If it doesn't work, do something else. Well, gang, here's something that works. So I heartily suggest that you look into this program, and if not in Massachusetts, that you talk with your groups about, getting something going there. So that's my aside on this. All right, I think that takes us to the next slide. And Bill, Joan had opened with the higher events, not the only thing you do. We wanted to just make that point a little bit more.
Sure. So other programming that we do and other vocational rehabilitation programs across the country have opportunities to provide on-the-job training funds to assist with training individuals on the job, evaluating their skills, and making an opportunity occur with providing reimbursement of training funds so that people can hit the ground running, if you will, in the specifications of the job. So we assist with pre-screening qualified candidates, developing a training program for that individual, and then also offering an on-the-job evaluation, which is similar to an OJT, but we believe that in this case an individual may have the skill set, and we want to deploy them with no risk to the employer. So we'll pick up a reimbursement fee of the individual while placed in the position, learning that skill. Its purpose is intended to ensure that the training requirements are meeting your needs as an employer and that they're captured for a long-term employee. From that, you also have the work opportunity tax credit, which you may or may not be familiar with. A lot of organizations are automatically signing on to this tax credit during the application process. And I believe that tax credit is still in effect, and every year they renew it. But I just want to add what I said to Joan last evening when we were talking about preparing for this call. One of the things that is really complementary to the hiring event right now is our JDTs, job-driven training programs. They really have been built off of this hiring event. So while we've been doing this hiring event, we've been learning and growing, and Joan came up with this really great idea of having an innovative approach to, augmenting the hiring event with training programs so that we can capture more individuals that are qualified to go to work and participate once they've been trained to the specifications of the employer to really enhance the opportunities of an outcome for both the employer, our customer, and our consumer or candidate for employment. So what we're doing now is reconfiguring or just augmenting our training programs to really blend into that hiring event on a really evidence-based practice basis. So we're tracking our training, and then how does that fit into the employer need for that hiring event? And I'd wrap it up with that. So it's becoming an ongoing practice and a foundational practice of what we do at the MRC.
Thank you.
So I just want to say that, other vocational rehabilitation agencies might not have hiring event programs, but they are mandated to work with employers to assist individuals with disabilities to obtain employment. And just want to do a plug for a conference that we're having on September 17th on bridging the skills gap, where employers will hear from other employers regarding creative and innovative strategies around building the skills that are needed to fill critical positions in the labor market.
Very good. Thank you. All right. Let's thank you, Joan. Let's move on to the next slide, and we are finishing up here. There's resources. You'll see these obviously on the deck when it's presented after the presentation. Joan did speak to the Bridging the Gap conference happening in September in Worcester. Employer focused about these programs, but other state rehabs, I hope, will be paying attention and tuning in for this sort of program. And to your point, Joan, I think other states don't have the particular programs that Massachusetts has, but having a discussion, starting a discussion between practitioner, OFCCP, and the other voc rehab groups, I think would be very beneficial to all to get working in this direction.
And I mean, if anyone on the call wants to reach out to me, Joan, or Bill regarding working with other VR agencies, please feel free to do so. Our email address is here. And Rhonda and her team is also available to provide information.
All right.
Absolutely. My office number is on there, as well as a email inbox that we check every day. Anybody who's interested can contact OFCCP. We will connect you with the correct state office, or you can, if you're not from Massachusetts, you can always call your local OFCCP office. But if you're Maine, New Hampshire, or Rhode Island, that is my office.
Coming to the end of our hour, we have a couple of minutes left. Joan, Bill, Rhonda, thank you for your time, and thank you also for putting your information up there as a resource. Appreciate that. Lauren, do we have questions in at this point? We are running out of time, but maybe we can take a couple if they're there.
Thank you, Paul. I think actually we've covered most of the questions, so I think we're at the end of our event. I want to thank the panelists very much, and to all of our attendees, thank you for joining us. We hope you'll join us again. On behalf of America's Job Exchange, have a great rest of your day, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.